They detested the idea of science being a branch of natural theology. They wanted it to be a strictly materialistic, without any notions of theological metaphysics. This does not mean that there were no scientists during Darwin's lifetime who believed in a creator God. Michael Faraday, who lived between 1791 to 1867, made astounding contributions to the field of electromagnetism. Historians today tell us that his Sandemanian branch of Christianity influenced his scientific discoveries. Louis Agassiz was a Swiss paleontologist and geologist who lived between 1807 and 1873. When he moved to the United States in 1846, Agassiz studied the fossils of fish at Harvard University and concluded there was absolutely no evidence for Darwinian evolution. Agassiz wrote, I quote, "Evidence of the existence of a creator constantly and thoughtfully working among the complicated structures that he has made is found throughout the natural world. The living world is clearly seen the intervention of an intelligent creator, the mental operations of the creator at every step." End quote. So there were creationist scientists like Faraday, Agassiz, James Clerk Maxwell, Lord Kelvin, all around Darwin. But Darwin wanted to present his theory of evolution in a completely materialistic framework. While Darwin was writing his famous book On the Origin of Species, a science war broke out among the philosophers of science, namely William Whewell and Auguste Comte. You see, the very word scientist was coined by William Whewell, who wanted to make science a strictly materialistic enterprise. Up to that point, science was called natural philosophy, and scientist was called a natural philosopher. But Whewell's intention was to completely isolate science from philosophy and frame it in a strictly materialistic worldview. Darwin, as his contemporary, made it possible to erect science on a strictly secular foundation. So scientific revolution started in a theistic framework, then around French Revolution it moved into a deistic framework, and through Darwin it moved into an atheistic framework. Deism might sound less antagonistic to Christian metaphysics than atheism, but it was developed as an intellectual movement out of hostility towards Christian foundations of Western society. During Darwin's lifetime, deists were ruling the science. Darwin got all his geology from Charles Lyell, who once said that his intention was to free science from Moses. Please listen to those words. To free science from Moses. That was Charles Lyell's objective. Lyell introduced the concept of uniformitarianism to claim that the world we observe is actually millions of years old. Darwin introduced the concept of natural selection to claim that all animals, including human beings, were formed as a result of natural processes rather than the creative activity of God. So the mission was complete. Charles Lyell freed geology from Moses, while Darwin freed biology from Moses. One historian wrote, I quote, "At the beginning of 19th century, science, religion and philosophy are interrelated and were close. They collided in Galapagos Islands." They collided in Galapagos Islands. Those were the islands where Darwin made his discoveries. Today, evolutionary biology is completely taken over by figures like Richard Dawkins and Jerry Coyne. Darwin published the 6th edition of Origin of Species in 1872. In the last sentence of that book, Darwin placed the Creator at the beginning of life on earth. He says, I quote, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. Please note those words. Life having been originally breathed by the Creator. Those are Darwin's words. Words that would put shivers in the spines of modern day atheists who do not tolerate the idea of God as far as the mind can imagine. No God at the beginning of life, no God at the beginning of solar system, no God at the beginning of the universe. But Darwin wrote, life having been originally breathed by the Creator. We can see a glimpse of Darwin's deism in those words. Darwin's view was God breathed the original life into creation, and that life was transformed into various living beings through the agencies of natural selection. Darwin was not a strict atheist, but he was a bridge on which scientific enterprise was carried from theism and deism on one side to atheism on the other side. The philosophers were keenly aware of the consequences of the worldview implanted by Darwin. Friedrich Nietzsche was the first philosopher to write in the post-Darwinian world. As Daniel Dennett wrote, I quote, Nietzsche saw a more cosmic message in Darwin: God is dead. You see, God is dead. Nietzsche got it right when he saw what Darwin did through his theory. So now you know where philosophy is going when we remove God as the creator of the world. Today, any discussion of theological metaphysics in scientific theory is viewed as superstitious and unscientific. So science, which was done in a strictly theistic framework, moved into a deistic framework, and through Darwin, it moved into an atheistic framework. This does not mean that all scientists today are atheists, but even the most devoutly religious scientist today would not articulate his scientific theory in a Christian metaphysical context as Newton did or Leibniz did. Secularism and naturalism have taken over the academic science. However, many people do not realize that very secularism itself is a faith position. Naturalism itself is a faith position. For example, Richard Dawkins started his book Selfish Gene with these words: in the beginning, self-replicating molecule. In the beginning, self-replicating molecule. Given enough time, that self-replicating molecule could transform into butterflies, horses, dinosaurs. Shakespeare would come out to write Hamlet, Newton would come out to write Principia, Jefferson would come out to write Declaration of Independence, Einstein would come out to write Theory of Relativity. All those things could happen through blind, random mutations. In the beginning, self-existing God, that is called a religion. In the beginning, self-replicating molecule, that is called science. But in reality, that is metaphysical naturalism pretending to be science. English philosopher Mary Midgley called it quasi-scientific speculation. The entire work of Richard Dawkins, she said, it is quasi-scientific speculation. She responded to Richard Dawkins with her book Evolution as a Religion in 1985. She pointed out what Richard Dawkins doing with evolutionary theory is not just making biological arguments in favor of evolution, but trying to answer the moral and philosophical questions from an evolutionary perspective. So Darwin played a pivotal role in providing a quasi-scientific foundation for naturalism. Not long ago, I was standing in front of University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida, and distributing gospel tracts. I was trying to hand over a gospel tract to a college student. She said, refusing my tract, "I believe in evolution," and walked away. The implication is, now I believe in evolution, I don't have to bother about God. For so many people, evolution took the place of religion. There is that self-replicating molecule undergoing natural selection through millions of years. Then we need to ask, does evolution stand the test of scientific scrutiny? Take paleontology, for example. Darwin called fossils as the serious problem to his theory, and they still remain a serious problem to his theory. Just a few days ago, biologist Stephen Meyer released his book on evolution entitled Darwin's Doubt: The Explosive Origin of Animal Life and the Case for Intelligent Design. It became a New York Times bestseller. He argued in the book that in Cambrian explosion, many animals suddenly appeared in the fossil record without apparent ancestors in geological layers. So many millions of animals appeared abruptly. This sudden appearance of animals and the complex information stored in DNA point us to a creator rather than the undirected, blind evolutionary processes. Please notice this fact. In Cambrian explosion, all phyla of animals suddenly appeared in the fossil strata. They do not show a tree of life pattern Darwin predicted in his evolutionary theory. Genetics proved another obstacle to Darwin's theory. Darwin actually supported Lamarck's ideas of evolution, like law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. The discovery of Mendel's laws of genetics disproved such ideas. With the discovery of chromosomes, American geneticist Thomas Hunt Morgan opposed the central idea of Darwinism, which is natural selection could produce wholly new species by acting on slight individual differences. As a result, between the years 1875 to 1925, Darwinism went into so-called the eclipse. But it did not die because, as I said earlier, Darwinian biologists have a religious adherence to the idea of evolution. At the latter part of his career, Morgan himself theorized that evolution has taken place by the incorporation into the race of those mutations that are beneficial to the life and reproduction of the organism. So even Morgan gave up and instead started to believe in mutation as the central mechanism of evolution. A mutation is basically a change of the nucleotide sequence of the genome of an organism. Mutations are basically errors in the language of genes. Mutations are destructive in nature. We have been studying over thousands of mutations over the last 100 years. How could you build something constructive out of things which are destructive in nature? Not one mutation shown to be effective in transforming one kind of organism into a different kind of organism. Mutations add no new information to the existing genome. Long before the discovery of genes and chromosomes, the 8th Duke of Argyll summarized the power of natural selection in these words. He said, "Natural selection can